So I want to welcome everybody who's watching. This is Raphael, and I have the pleasure today of being here with Robert. And the reason I've asked Robert to come together with me for a video interview is because, as many of you know, I have a passion for the idea of communing, the way that two people or more can come together in presence and bring new light and positive change to each other's process in a way that often we can't do alone, especially because, as I've come to believe, we're not made to do this alone when it comes to healing, growth, change, transformation. And recently I had a conversation with Robert in which he was sharing with me some of his personal practices along this line of the art of communing. And I was so inspired, and I asked him if he would just share a little bit for all of my blog readers and viewers, just so that they could get a real, everyday, kind of up close personal example of what we mean and how it works in one way that Robert has created for himself and with his partners. So Robert, thanks so much for giving us the opportunity to learn about the way that you commune.
Thank you.
All right. So why don't you just start off, if you could, by telling us how you came to this and how you put it together and how it began.
I think one thing is being in a situation where I can go to work to a job that I don't particularly like, but having a really hard time doing things on my own, and then finding that a lot of people are in the same situation, that they go to work, but on their own they want to move to doing different things or want to move to do certain things, but somehow not able to really have a structure that supports that.
So you were interested in creating a structure with others to support the work that you do on your own.
Yes.
Go ahead.
And I have experience with focusing partnerships, focusing as the focusing developed by Gene Chandlin. And it's usually used to practice listening to each other. And I always wanted to take that process more into working on projects as opposed to listening to one's psychological problems or problems that would usually be talked about in therapy. And so this process, what we do is we say what we want to do and then somehow stay with each other, sometimes all day or however much time we have, and keep checking in with each other, usually over Skype, and just say how it went the last hour or half hour or 2 hours, whatever time we agree, and whatever has been in the way of doing what we wanted to do, and whatever we did or didn't do that makes it easier to move forward.
Okay, great. That's so helpful. And I'm really glad that you mentioned focusing and that you are a practitioner, and I think you're also a focusing facilitator.
Mhm.
So you have a real depth there, and it also puts you very much connected to your body in all of this, which of course, is music to my ears from the work that I do. And we're coming at it from a very similar way. I want to highlight what your real creative leap was, as I've seen it, is to take the practice of looking for the felt sense, listening for it, sharing it, and then rather than just looking for, let's say, insight or shift, as
Mhm.
you said, you're wanting to bring that to bear in a positive way towards creativity, achievement, goals, etc. That's did I get that right?
Yes, and also, like you said in your introduction, I'm not sure if I got your words right, something about being present with each other.
Hmm.
And I think the focusing process is really a being present with one's felt sense, which
Yes.
includes thoughts and feelings and body sensations, and then being with someone who is able to have that depth of listening, of being with that, and which of course expands one's own ability to listen to others, and also it is very energizing to be seen that way.
Yes, yes, and you just reminded me that when we were first talking about this, we discussed the two great spiritual themes of being and manifestation.
Hmm.
And often with focusing and with emotional connection, the work that I do, we're primarily attuned towards being, and yet you and myself and others are looking to blend being and manifestation, to take the ability that we have to be present somatically and emotionally, and to use that for a freeing up of our creativity and our ability to manifest in the world. So it's really about putting those two things together, and that's what I saw that you were doing and what I wanted to highlight for viewers. And oh, go ahead, you were going to add something.
Well, I think as I'm listening to this, I noticed that when I focused only on manifestation or primarily on manifestation, that there was some connection to myself that I usually lost.
Hmm.
And I think in the work I'm doing now with partners, it keeps getting reestablished. So it's not only I want to do this and now I'm doing this and I'm gonna achieve this, but there's sort of I keep coming back to how does this really connect to me?
Yes.
How much I as a whole being really engaged, and not just my
Hmm.
head that wants certain things because maybe that then I would be more acceptable outside, or I would be think of myself a little better, or whatever that is. So
Yes.
so the check-ins are an opportunity to keep connecting to all of it.
Yes. Yes. Now, uh, there's something that people talk about often in spiritual circles. It might even be a cliche at this point. The idea of doing arising from being. But what I hear is a practical version of that in what you're describing. So it's not just a mental striving for accomplishment. It's not devoid of presence or of our bodily awareness, but that this is really um, doing coming from being in action and in partnership.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I think one thing that felt not satisfying enough for me in the way I practiced focusing in the beginning was that it seemed like it was mostly about feeling better,
Hmm.
which I think is great, to have someone listen to you and feel better, or being seen or being heard when what
Hmm.
one is thinking. But I think I wanted more, and I wanted to be able to integrate that into the process.
Hmm.
So now I can really say, oh, okay, it's not, I might not even feel better, but I can look around and see, wow, all this got done.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so there's more, um, I'm not sure how to say that. I'm not only considering how I feel, I'm also considering what has actually happened.
Yes, and sometimes when we're only focusing on how we feel, while that's so important, as
Mm,
you're highlighting, it's it's not the only thing, and oftentimes our feelings may not actually be in sync with the actual data of what's occurring or what we've
right.
accomplished. So, for instance, for a variety of reasons, you might feel like it was a hard day or that you were pulling teeth to do the work that you'd set out to do. And on that day, you might actually have a beautiful result. whereas on another day you may be feeling like you're filled with vibrancy, and
Hmm.
yet it doesn't come out in your creativity the way that you would like. So here's you and I, two people who deeply value feeling,
Hmm.
also recognizing that only focusing on feeling is incomplete.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, good. Now you said something towards the beginning of our conversation that I'm sure caught people's attention. You said something about, you might be together with people all day,
Hmm.
and they probably wondered what the heck that was about. So
Uh-huh.
I'm wondering if you could describe uh, an example of a day in
Hmm.
which you might commune with your partner, how that might look through the course of the day so that people could really see how they might be able to customize that in their own life with their own communing partner.
Well, I like the word customizing
Mm.
because that is so important that there's not one model that's
Mhm.
supposed to fit everyone, but it's really something we find each day what is needed.
Mhm.
So the most common thing would be that we, first of all, we agree on a time to start.
Mhm.
So then at that time, we choose how much time we want to take for what we call a check-in.
Mhm.
So let's say we say 10 minutes each. In those 10 minutes, I can do whatever I want and I get the full attention of my partner.
Mhm.
I can say how I feel, I can say what I did yesterday. And anything, their commitment, the partner's commitment is to
Mhm.
pay full attention.
Mhm.
But then I'm also making a plan for what I'll be doing the next, let's say, hour.
Mhm.
Then my partner checks in, I'm the listener. I pay attention as fully as I can.
Mhm.
And then we go on to be on our own for, let's say, this hour, or it could be 20 minutes, or it could be whatever time period we choose.
Mhm.
After that, there's another check in. So this already energizes my way of working. It's different than just being on my own. Maybe I
Mhm.
don't like to do this. Maybe I would need to check an email. Maybe I change my mind of what I'm doing. And then in that check-in, I check if I did what I said I would do, and if I made my plans in a way that actually helped me to focus on my task. Maybe it didn't go well, and I say, well, maybe what I said I would do was too vague.
Mhm.
Or maybe I was thinking too much ahead. I really couldn't do this right now because all those other things are not in place.
So a couple things strike me. One of them is that the hour that you spend is one
Mhm.
in which you know that you have a check-in scheduled after with a
Right.
very compassionate and supportive person, so that it can't help but change the quality of presence with which you enter into that hour. Even though the person isn't there with you, there's a feeling of accompaniment. You know you're going to be sharing and reflecting with somebody else. So do you indeed?
And there have been days when my partner said, no, I don't really want to hang up the phone or Skype.
Mhm.
Let's just keep it on.
Mhm.
And then we kind of worked like almost like in the same room
Right. So
with, and I, and
in terms of customizing, like we were talking
uh
about before,
right,
you
exactly.
saw what was best, for
Right,
each of you. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. And of course, with Skype, if you've got a computer on, there's no cost or anything in just leaving it going, even if, you're not in view of the camera, or if you want to be in view of the camera.
Right.
You could be working on a project for 15 minutes and then just turn around to the camera and say, "Hey, it's going great. Hope you're having a good experience too. Looking forward to our check-in."
Right. Or if I want to listen to the music my partner is listening to or not, I can turn
Mute.
it,
You can
keep
right. You
it.
can mute it
Yeah.
or turn it up.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And so, um, Can you give us an example of a kind of thing that you might be working on in this hour that we're talking about? What kind of project feels like, from your experience, it's a good match with this kind of partnering?
I think pretty much any project,
Mm-hmm.
and I have examples of working on my taxes,
Mm-hmm.
generally working on things that I've been procrastinating to work on,
Mm-hmm.
working on creative projects, working on even doing things like exercises.
Mm-hmm.
Like just say I haven't done any exercises, that's what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
today I had a check-in and I said, well, I'm not only saying I'm gonna exercise, I'm gonna make a list of exactly what I'm gonna do,
Mm-hmm. And
and
then,
that
yeah,
and
what
that
happened? What
turned
happened when you did that?
it turned out to be the most important thing
Mm-hmm.
because I know sometimes on my own I say I'm gonna exercise and it's kind of too vague.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't have sometimes I don't think about making a list on my own, but by saying it out loud to someone,
Mm-hmm.
and then it just I just knew I wanted to do that.
Yes. Yes.
So
Now,
so there's like all these little things that I notice that come into play, um, that wouldn't be there if I didn't say it to someone.
yes, yes, exactly. The power of communing in
Mhm.
action. And so we talked about an hour. You could choose to check in less time. You
Right,
could choose to check in the next day. It's
right.
really about when you tune in to your own felt sense and also the felt sense of your partner, what's arising in a way that would be the most helpful for both of you.
Right. It could
Yeah.
be I need to go for a walk.
Mhm.
I need to whatever buy. So I mean, it could be a lot of things.
Mhm.
Making calls to doctors, to anything.
Mhm.
There's really no. I think if the only consistent thing is the agreement to spend time together
Mhm.
and somehow share that time,
Yes.
and then it's not only me getting attention in that time, but
Mhm.
also hearing and seeing someone else finding a way to do what they want to do for themselves is extremely inspiring.
Yes. Yes. And you talked about a range of things. You talked about exercise, doing your taxes, but
Cleaning
also,
up the
yeah,
office.
but also as we can see behind you, you're a painter.
Hmm.
So you use this process also for something that would be considered more purely creative. And you described to me when we last talked how it's actually really refined, and benefited you in
Hmm.
your process, in your creative process. Yes.
I think to sort of and that's not only for painting, but I
Mhm.
think for any project,
Mhm.
uh, what what's a tendency for me is to see things as overwhelming,
Mhm.
and then it's really helpful for me to have somebody to talk to,
Mhm.
so I can slow things down and
Mhm.
chunk them down into small enough pieces so it
Mhm.
doesn't become this huge project. And I find myself a lot in situations where I look at something and it's just like I don't know where to start.
Mhm.
And then my thoughts go into it's too much, it's going to take too long, it's too unpleasant, all those things. And then having committed a day to work on this and somehow having the support of someone with me helps me to just say, okay, I'm going to do this, and this, or I'm going to focus on this aspect of it, or I'm going to do it even if I don't know if this is going to work.
Yes. Now, one of the things I spoke about when first introducing this concept was a person who was working with clutter. something
Mhm.
many people can relate to, which
Right.
definitely has that overwhelm factor. You walk
Right.
into the room and you see the clutter, and your heart sinks, and you want to, eat cookies or go to sleep and never wake up.
Exactly. Exactly.
So the, as you're calling it, the chunking down
Mhm.
into small manageable parts seems like something that could really happen very easily and in a kind of warm, supportive way when you have a partner like you're describing.
Well, and I think there's a chunking down sort of on the outside that
Mhm.
I say, okay, I'm only going to clean half the desk
Mhm.
and not focus on anything else in the room.
Mhm.
And then I'm going to, well, I mean, that's one chunking down. But there's also a chunking down internally
Mm.
where I say, okay, I'm going to spend 10 minutes and I'm not going to sit down those 10 minutes. I'm
Mhm.
just going to keep moving and doing things. And that's
Mhm.
already different than thinking I'm going to have to solve everything at
Mhm.
once. Or
And it's.
so I think what I'm saying is there's also a choosing a focus.
Mhm.
Some simple like a task has sometimes seems to have so many different I don't know how to say aspects to it, and
Yes.
sometimes it's just easy to have one thing like all I'm going to do now is XYZ,
Yes.
and I'm going to spend the next 15 or 20 minutes doing only that.
Yes. And in your awareness, it seems like you're holding your presence, what you're feeling somatically, and you're noticing that. You're noticing the quality of your thinking. So there's a presence, and there's that doing. And this goes back to what we were talking about before. It seems like both of them are coming together naturally because you've intended for that, and you have someone as your partner who's also attuned to
Hmm.
all of that. So
Hmm.
it's you're not coming back to your partner and saying,
Right,
okay, so what did you accomplish and what didn't you? You're also
right,
paying attention to the quality of the experience.
right, right.
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying now, that everything coming together,
Mhm.
that's of course not the way it always happens.
Mhm.
That, I mean, that's the intent.
Yes.
And but then I think the wonderful thing is to be able to venture into maybe more stressful situations,
Mhm.
because like too overwhelm is in some way stressful,
Mhm.
and and have the support of someone to go there and pay attention to just the way you laid it out,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
see if I can do that in a situation where maybe not so comfortable at this point.
Yes. Now, you mentioned to me something before which I think would be really valuable for people to hear, and that is when you have gone off to spend some time on a project and it hasn't gone well,
Mhm.
that there's a way on your own that it would just seem like a failure. You might judge
Yeah.
yourself and kind of collapse around that idea of screwing up,
Mhm.
but that when you know that you're coming back to your partner, and when you do come back to your partner, something different might happen. So, can you describe that something different?
Well, as I'm listening to you, the way it comes to me now is I have an opportunity to learn from failure
Mhm.
in a way that I haven't been able to do on my own yet.
Mhm.
Like I think on my own something doesn't go well, and I call it a failure, and and there's a tendency to want to run away,
Mhm.
and I'm sort of stuck with a feeling bad about myself.
Mhm.
I think if I have someone to check in with, I can say this, and this happened, or when I got to this point, all of a sudden I didn't want to be here anymore. Or so there's a way to look at it and find a way forward.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
then I can say, oh, the way I said it was too vague, or there's an emotion that maybe needs attention or being with, or some way of looking at what I'm doing that's maybe not, maybe too I don't know, maybe not present enough.
Yeah.
So there's a way to learn from that failure.
That sounds great, and I think also what's true is that there's a softening around the whole concept even of failure. That you're bringing it back to a supportive partnership. You know there's something to learn, but also in that process, it doesn't even feel in the same way as failure. It
Right,
just feels like learning. And there's a
right,
way that a lot of the resistance and the tension that we hold around not meeting our own high standards, which of course makes things more difficult, in
right,
this case relaxes so that we can learn and then we can also go forward. I mean, in your case, it might be the very next hour is when
right.
you get to go forward and feel and do something differently that you wouldn't if you hadn't got that chance to report back.
Well, and also as I'm hearing you say high standards,
Hmm.
uh, that's a lot of times already a disconnect
Yeah,
from being.
yeah,
And I think the coming back always it comes back to this is how it is right now, whether I like it or not, and what can I do in this situation with what I have right here.
yeah. So you're beginning with a
Right,
profound acceptance, and then
right,
everything comes from that.
right. And as soon as I lose that, I go, of course, into my high standards and something turns against myself.
Yeah, yeah,
And so the frequent check ins are very helpful in stopping that process.
yeah. Great. That's very helpful. Now, there are some lucky people who are out there listening who already know who they would like to invite into this process with them. Then
Mhm.
there are probably a whole lot of other people thinking like, "Oh my gosh, I don't even know if there's anybody who I could be that open with and trusting with as a partner." So I'm wondering if you could just say a little bit about what you have come to see as the most important qualities for someone to be a partner in this way.
I think the most important, I mean, the first one I'm thinking of is an acceptance uh, that it's just not working, whatever you're doing on your own.
Mhm.
And I think without that, there's really no way to be that open.
Mhm.
And I have partners who are, I mean, they're very accomplished in some ways,
Mhm.
and also successful in their business or career,
Mhm.
and they wouldn't easily tell everyone that their office is a mess or that they haven't done their taxes in 2 years or whatever
Mhm.
it is.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think, and also in myself, because and I think it goes back to what you said, these ideals of who we should be.
Mhm.
I think it's just accepting that that's not so, that we are not
Yes. Yes.
those ideals. And also, I'm just beginning to lose that now. But when I started this process, there was always like a little bit of enjoying it
Mhm.
and a whole lot of voices that said, "You're a weakling, that you need this."
Mm. Uh-huh. Yes. Yes.
Because I don't think that's how we think of ourselves in our culture, as needing that kind of support.
Right. And so one of the things I hear you saying is that a fundamental quality that's necessary is vulnerability, being open and transparent in someone's own need for something like this.
Mhm.
Also, what you shared was is that even when one opens to that need, there at least at first is a tremendous amount of judgment about it that we inherit from our culture, our
Oh,
family.
I've had, I mean, all my partners, we had the same thing. It's like like we do something for an hour and it's like, oh, that's great, but why do you need somebody to do this with?
Yes.
Why couldn't you do this on your own? What's the big deal about whatever, cleaning up a desk?
Right. So don't pat yourself on the back. don't get too proud or excited, because if you were really up to snuff, then you wouldn't even need this whole crazy thing that you're setting up. So,
Well, not even that. It's almost like don't enjoy the process too much because there's something
mm,
not normal of needing that.
yes, yes, I see that, and I think
Uh-huh,
many people will relate to that.
uh-huh.
Uh, and it comes from that pull yourself up by your own bootstraps model that we have. The idea that we are supposed to be independent and do it on our own. First of all, as if
Or that you
that's
should be able to do something at the age we are, or whatever. All those things.
yes, but even the idea that that's somehow better, when in fact what you're exploring and showing us through the experience that you're having with your partners is that you might, if given the opportunity to choose between doing it alone and doing it together, you might actually come to choose doing it together because there's real heart to heart connection in it, which we so long for, most of us. And also, there's an enjoyment factor. And that's what happens when doing does come out of being. You find yourself in a flow such that good days, bad days, it doesn't really matter, but just the whole process of doing your work, of putting forward what you want to in the world, now has a quality of depth and presence, and I would even say something sacred about just, moment by moment, how you be and what you do, and it comes from being able to be open and sharing with another in this way.
Well, I think there are many levels to this. I mean, I think there's one level that's kind of like having a workout partner.
Hmm.
I mean, anybody has more energy if they have a partner with them.
Yes.
And and then I think in another level there's the connection, which is also energizing, not just on a physical level but also in the way we are thinking. There's just something more comes into the thought process.
Yes.
And then I think what I'm noticing now that I am getting more open to take in what the other person brings.
Hmm.
It's just I think it's the kind of enrichment that you would call sacred,
Yes.
because it's a very deep gift to really, I don't know, just one thing I've been doing a lot is just reading certain things and really going deeper into how the meaning resonates for me
Hmm.
and exchanging that with people. And it's just so enriching.
Yes. Yes. As you said just before you said the word enriching, I was the word of richness came up for me just in the way that you deepen into your life experience through this partnership. I think it's very beautiful, and I want to just end on one note. uh, I have had the inspiration myself that if and whenever I have the time amongst my many projects, it would be wonderful to try to create an exchange online, a place where people could come to meet one another in an easy way, get a sense of each other, whether it's through chat, through video, etc., to find partners if in fact they don't readily have them in their existing social circle. And so I was wondering, with your partners, were they all people that you had a meaningful friendship with beforehand, or did some of you come together just out of your shared passion for this kind of approach?
They were all long-term focusing partners of mine.
Aha, focusing. Yeah. So, uh, would you say that I mean, there are many approaches that are kind of in the same realm, whether it's focusing or emotional connection, meditation, mindfulness. Would you say that a person's uh, interest and passion for that kind of awareness is the is what you'd be looking for most, along with the vulnerability that we spoke about before? If, let's say, you were meeting someone on an exchange and you were
Right.
thinking, should I work with this person? We've already established that they would need to have a vulnerability and an openness, and then now it seems like you're saying something else you'd want to look for would be someone's orientation towards a mindful and embodied approach to living.
That one, I'm not sure yet what to say to that because I've had a lot of frustrations along the way,
Hmm.
and I think for a lot of people, it's not easy to keep up a partnership if there's not a teacher
Hmm.
or some kind of course setting or workshop setting.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure. But
That's
I'm
it.
honest.
I really appreciate your
Uh-huh,
hesitation there, because
uh-huh,
right now I'm just about to begin a 9-month program which
uh-huh,
is about a community of practice.
uh-huh,
And it's only available, as I've created it right now, for people who have already gone through a year-long program that I have, so they
mhm,
know that they have a shared foundation, and also that they're passionate enough about practice that they are willing to give another year to developing that in their life,
mhm.
and they're doing it with my facilitation.
Right.
So I hear you saying that there are some really important questions
Mhm.
about what kind of structure, support, and leadership might be essential in allowing people to not just start this, but to really stick with it over a period of time.
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah. So, well,
Because in some ways, I have now what I've been wanting for 10 years,
yeah.
and I've not been successful before in uh, in having that in my life.
Yes, yes. Well, I so appreciate all of the insight that you've given us along these lines. I want to invite viewers to email me if they have questions, and if they have questions for you, I'll pass
Mhm.
them along to you.
Okay.
And if I do um, attempt to develop something uh, around this idea of the exchange, finding people who we don't already have, I'm definitely going to come back to you and ask you to collaborate with me on that.
Yeah. I mean, I would
And
love to.
yeah, and I'd love to hear also from any viewers their own thoughts about this last question that's lingering for us about structure and leadership, and how to keep something like this going when it's so easy just to kind of trail off. You know, even
Right.
even if you have some early gains, our old habits, our busyness can make it so that we don't keep going.
Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of maybe our next chapter of exploration
Uh huh.
is looking into that. But Robert, again, I so appreciate you and want to offer you great gratitude for this service that you've given people today. I think many people are going to be as inspired as I was, and even just the quality of your expression as you talk about it, as you share it. Um, I believe it's very easy to see the gains and also your essence and your passion for this just in the way that you consider the questions and the way that you share. So in that way, even though you have achieved more in this process than you have before, and you feel really good about it, also it just comes through the way that you be, and as I said to you last time, the sparkle in your eye. So I really
Okay.
want to honor that,
Uh huh.
and to just say what a privilege it is to be able to talk about all of this with you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So here's to chapter 2 whenever that occurs.
Great. Looking forward to it.